Greetings, dear viewers. On the calendar is the 17th of December, 2025, and I present to you a regular analysis of the situation at the front. Over the past day, a significant number of transformations in the situation have been recorded, and information has also been received directly from the front lines. The most substantial movements are observed on the Zaporizhzhia front, near Stepnogorsk and Huliaipole. In addition, changes are noted on the Dnipro Pokrovsk sector, in the vicinity of Myrnohrad, and on the Dobropillia direction. Movements are being recorded on the Krasnyi Lyman and Siversk fronts, as well as on the Kupiansk direction. From other sectors of the line of contact, predominantly an information flow is coming in, which we will analyze and examine in this material. We continue our review on the map. From the Orikhiv front, information is arriving, and transformations are also being noted. Let's begin the analysis with Stepnogorsk. In this settlement, intense confrontation continues for control over the territory. A number of pro-Russian information channels are transmitting data about the conducting of clearing operations in this settlement and the probability of confirming evidence appearing soon, which will allow us to expand the control zone displayed on the map and make corresponding corrections. In addition, today a video was received from this location. At this place, the forward lines of Russian forces came under attacks by FPV units of Ukrainian forces. I remind you that previously, reports were received that the Russian army controls all of this territory in the direction of Kupiansk. However, for a prolonged time, no confirming evidence came from there. And finally, today material arrived from this point. Here, the Russian army advanced 3 kilometers in the direction of Kupiansk. Probably the control zone here is significantly more extensive, however confirming evidence is still absent, so it is not possible to correctly make changes to the map. Nevertheless, it is already obvious that Russian forces are successfully moving toward Kupiansk. Also, yesterday, coloring of the map was performed on this sector, where an expansion of the controlled zone occurred. And probably, in the near future, the territory under the control of the Russian army will become even wider. At the current moment, Russian forces are carrying out shelling of Ukrainian forces' positions in the area of Primorsk, Kupiansk, and Pavlivka. FPV units and artillery batteries are actively engaged here. In response, Ukrainian military forces were striking Russian positions near Plavny, Kamyansk, Stepov, Mali Shcherbaki, and directly Stepnogorsk, where FPV crews of the Ukrainian side are actively working. No transformations in favor of Ukrainian forces are observed here, and movements are noted exclusively in favor of the Russian army, despite the fact that Ukrainian forces are quite actively counter-attacking in the direction of Stepnogorsk. Moving on to Orikhiv itself. From Orikhiv at the current moment, no serious news or transformations have arrived. Reports are coming in, and these reports come daily, about Russian forces delivering strikes on Ukrainian positions in the southern part, and strikes are also being delivered on positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Novoandriivka. However, no advancement is noted today. I remind you that earlier, data appeared in pro-Russian sources about Russians having complete control over Novodanilivka. Also, Mala Tokmachka was under complete Russian control, and assault operations of Orikhiv were being carried out, or more precisely, were beginning. Some pro-Russian information resources reported the consolidation of Russian forces in the southeastern part of this settlement. However, these data never received confirmation and remained at the information level. Some pro-Russian sources somewhat get ahead of events, transmitting such information. At the current day, the situation here is unchanged. Moving on to the Huliaipole front. From the Huliaipole front, an abundant amount of video materials is arriving, and advancement of the Russian army is also being noted. Today, a video was received from this point, and it was possible to determine the geolocation of Russian positions. The forward lines of Russian forces were located here, and all the territory marked in red has currently passed under complete Russian control. Also, from there, numerous video materials are arriving where Russian FPV drones are destroying equipment of Ukrainian forces, tanks of the Ukrainian army. Also, video material arrived where a Russian FPV crew struck 3 fighters of Ukrainian forces. 1 fighter had his legs torn off, 2 were finished off by FPV drones. Such videos are unacceptable to publish on YouTube, Therefore, this video is posted on the Telegram channel, a link to which is indicated in the description, but these video materials are not for people with weak nerves. And everything indicates that Russian forces in the coming week will probably establish complete control over Huliaipole. Despite active counter-offensive actions from Ukrainian forces, the Ukrainian army here is not recapturing territories, is not stabilizing the front line, and Russian forces continue the offensive on this sector. With the support of FPV drones, FPV units, and artillery, Russian forces are successfully advancing in this settlement, and moreover, the pace of advancement here is quite significant. Also, Russian forces are delivering strikes on Ukrainian positions in the area of Vozdvizhenka and Lyubitske. Strikes were delivered here on temporary deployment points of Ukrainian forces. I remind you that far behind the front line runs as follows. Intense confrontation is going on here, and in settlements west of the front line, temporary deployment points of Ukrainian forces are located, reserves of the Ukrainian army, and Russian reconnaissance establishes the location of reserves of Ukrainian forces, and strikes are delivered on them with the help of aviation. The same FAB 3000, FAB 1500 arrive at temporary deployment points of Ukrainian forces. Thus, all reserves are destroyed even before delivery to Huliaipole, far behind the line of combat contact. Also, materials were received about Russian forces expanding the control zone south of Varvarivka and assaulting Zelena. I remind you that from there, reports repeatedly arrived over the past several days about Russian forces assaulting this settlement. However, for now this information is not receiving confirmation, at least at the time of video recording. Confirming evidence has not yet arrived from there. The last confirming evidence came from these points. The forward lines of Russians were located here, which came under attacks by FPV units of Ukrainian forces, and no greater advancement was recorded here. However, nevertheless, reports are arriving. At the current day, here are such news and transformations. Moving on to the Dnipropetrovsk front. On the Dnipropetrovsk front, transformations are being noted and information is arriving. As for the news, Russian forces continue to deliver strikes on temporary deployment points of Ukrainian forces in the area of Pokrovsk. FPV drones and artillery are actively engaged here on Ukrainian positions. Also, Russian forces are delivering strikes on positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Bratska and Andriivka. And confirming materials arrived that Russian forces managed to enter Herasimivka to expand the control zone north of Pishchane. I remind you that yesterday, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced the taking of Pishchane under complete control, and now pressure is being applied on Herasimivka. Previously, data arrived about the transition of Herasimivka under complete Russian control, and Russian forces had already begun assault operations of Bratske. However, only today did confirming materials arrive about the expansion of the control zone. For now, Herasimivka has not been completely taken under complete control by Russian forces. However, nevertheless, movement is going on in the direction of Bratske. Also, Russian forces successfully consolidated on the southeastern outskirts of Andriivka. Here, this street passed under complete control of Russian forces, and assault operations of this settlement are being conducted. Previously, data already arrived about Russian forces expanding the control zone here, and in fact, half of Andriivka was taken under complete control. However, this information turned out to be premature. Therefore, here for now are such transformations. As soon as additional materials arrive, naturally, we will make changes to the map and will inform you about everything. At the current day, here are such news and transformations. Moving on to the Pokrovsk front. From the Pokrovsk front, information is predominantly arriving, and transformations are also being noted on the Dobropillia salient. There are transformations in the area of Myrnohrad. As for the news, Ukrainian forces are trying to counterattack in the direction of Molodetska, Udakne, and Kotlino. Also here, Ukrainian forces are delivering strikes on positions of Russian forces with the help of FPV drones. In response, Russian forces are trying to expand the control zone in the area of Novopodhorodne. Also, it is reported that all counterattacks from Ukrainian forces have been repelled in the area of Molodetska, Udakne, and Kotlino, and Russian forces are delivering strikes on positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Novolexandrivka. As for Novopodhorodne, From there, data arrived earlier about significant expansion by Russian forces of the control zone in this settlement. Previously, a single confirming evidence arrived about the expansion of the control zone in the direction of this settlement. From this point, video material was received where Russian forces consolidated on the outskirts of Novopodhorodne, and no more information arrived from there. Nevertheless, pro-Russian sources claim that all of this territory has passed under complete Russian control. As soon as confirming information arrives, naturally, we will make changes to the map. As for Hryshyn, here, Ukrainian forces are actively counter-attacking. It is reported that Ukrainian forces here are suffering enormous losses. However, they are not managing to advance here. Nevertheless, Russian forces previously already reported about the expansion of the control zone in this settlement. However, apparently, the information turned out to be premature, and here is the only last information that arrived, again from the southeastern part. Here, Russian forces managed to consolidate in this settlement. However, no further advancement was recorded here. And let's move on to Myrnohrad. In the area of Myrnohrad, the echelon defense has already been broken. Ukrainian forces are offering focal resistance. However, everything leads to the fact that Myrnohrad will be lost in the coming days. Today, this sector of combat operations has passed under complete Russian control. FPV units, artillery, and even aviation are actively engaged here on temporary deployment points of Ukrainian forces, on Ukrainian positions, on fortified areas of Ukrainian forces. And here, the defense of Ukrainian military personnel is gradually being pressed through. And everything leads to the fact that Myrnohrad will be lost in the near future. Also, Russian forces are expanding the control zone in the area of Rodinska. It is reported that here, 90% of this settlement is under complete Russian control, and the remaining 10% are in a grey zone, as Ukrainian forces here are actively counter-attacking in the direction of Rodinske, suffering enormous losses, trying to reach Myrnohrad to unblock this pocket. However, they are not managing to do this. Here, FPV units of Russian forces destroy all equipment, all fighters, all assault groups, even on approach to Myrnohrad and Rodinske. No advancement here in favor of the Ukrainian army is being recorded, and nevertheless, Ukrainian forces do not abandon attempts to counterattack daily. Moving on to the Dobropillia salient. In the area of the Dobropillia salient, transformations are being noted, and information is also arriving. The news concerns Belitska, Suketska, Nove Shakove. Here, Russian forces are trying to take this settlement by assault, expanding the control zone in the direction of this settlement. Also, information arrives that Russian forces are delivering strikes on positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Kucherov Yar, Novopavlivka, in the area of Toretsk and Sofiivka. And aviation is actively engaged on Ukrainian positions in the area of Chernihivka, Shevchenko, and Dobropillia. As for transformations arrived from this sector of combat operations. From this point, video material arrived, on which the forward lines of Russians were located, and all the territory marked in red today has passed under complete control of Russian forces. And it is already reported that assault operations are being conducted in the direction of Novoshakov. As for Shakov, here, the situation has still not been clarified. I remind you that pro-Russian sources report that Shakov and Vladimirivka are under Russian control, and assault operations of Sofiivka are being conducted. Pro-Ukrainian sources claim that Shakov is under the control of Ukrainian forces, also Sofiivka is under the control of Ukrainian forces, and attacks are going in the direction of Vladimirivka. Contradictory information is arriving from both sides, therefore here for now, there are no transformations on the map. As soon as confirming information arrives, we will make changes to the map. However, according to the latest news, it can be said that fierce confrontation is being conducted for Shakov. At least in the area of this settlement, fierce confrontation is being conducted, and it is unknown whether Russian forces control this settlement or Ukrainian forces. Most likely, this settlement is in a grey zone, and on this sector of combat operations, this particular settlement is quite active. At the current day, here is such news, moving on further on the map. On the Kostiantynivka front, today there are no transformations. It is reported that Russian forces are trying to straighten the front line east of this settlement, more precisely in the eastern part. Everything leads to the fact that Russian forces will bypass this settlement, physically cut off the supply road, and only then conduct assault operations. I remind you, earlier Russian forces consolidated in the southeastern part, straightened the front line to supply road T0504, in the following manner took all of this territory under their control, and no further advancement is being recorded here. Also, active confrontation continues in the area of Pleshevka, in the area of Yablonivka, north of this settlement, and Russian forces are delivering strikes on positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Stepanivka and in Kostiantynivka itself. Also, video material arrived from this point. Here, a strike was delivered with the help of aviation on a temporary deployment point of Ukrainian forces. Personnel, as reported, were destroyed. Also, the situation with Vyrolyubivka and Chervone has not been clarified. I remind you that yesterday we talked about this, and for the last several days we have been talking about these settlements. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced that Chervone, Mayiske, Klinove, and Bezimene passed under complete Russian control, and thus Russian forces should control all of this territory. Also, in the following manner, the map should look, however, this information does not correspond to reality. The last received information was from there that Russian forces are assaulting Vyrolyubivka. However, no advancement is being recorded here yet. Therefore, the map here is without transformations. And many expect that Russian forces, after taking certain settlements, Kostiantynivka, will go with assault operations in the direction of Kramatorsk. However, some military correspondents voiced completely different information. It is reported that now Sloviansk and Kramatorsk are not priority targets on this sector of combat operations, at least along the line of combat contact. And it is reported that Russian forces will first exit towards Zaporizhzhia, and probably further will move along the line of the Dnipro bank. In the following manner, Russian military personnel will advance, and the main forces will be directed precisely in this direction. And Kramatorsk, naturally, will be left for later. I remind you that many military correspondents claimed that Russian forces will move along the Dnipro in the following manner and take all of this territory under complete control. However, how much time will be needed is still unknown. Nevertheless, they are already claiming that now the main forces are directed precisely at the Zaporizhzhia direction, at the assault of Huliaipole, and at the assault of Stepnogorsk. Therefore, here we can only monitor the development of events. And let's move on to the Siversk front. On the Siversk front, after the taking of Siversk, Russian forces are bringing up reserves, conducting rotation, and also trying to close pockets between Platonivka and Siversk itself. All of this territory is now being cleared by Russian military personnel. Today, video material was received from this point. The forward lines of Russians were located here, which precisely came under attacks by FPV units of Ukrainian forces. Despite the fact that Siversk is lost, here Ukrainian forces are working with FPV drones on Russian positions. At the current day, all the territory marked in red has passed under complete control of Russian forces. And now data is arriving that Russian forces are straightening the front line, clearing this entire pocket, and further, after clearing all of this territory, will free up forces and will move in the direction of Rye-Oleksandrivka, more precisely Reznikivka, and further in the direction of Rye-Oleksandrivka. At the current day, here are such news and transformations moving on further on the map. On the Krasnolymansk front, transformations are being noted and information is arriving. The news concerns Sviatohirsk, Yarova and Drobyshev. Active confrontation is being conducted here. Yesterday it was reported that fierce confrontation is being conducted here. Today it is reported that active confrontation is being conducted. However, the situation is not yet clear. Until we receive confirming evidence about the advancement of the Russian army, the situation here will not be clarified. Also, Russian forces are delivering strikes on positions of Ukrainian forces in the area of Lyman, and Ukrainian forces are delivering strikes on Russian positions in the area of Zarikne. And FPV units are actively engaged on forest massifs south of Lyman. In these forest massifs, positions of Ukrainian forces are located. There are defense lines of Ukrainian forces, trenches of Ukrainian forces, and strikes are being delivered on them with the help of FPV drones. These video materials are published in pro-Russian Telegram channels. so you can visit authoritative channels and see how strikes are being delivered on Ukrainian positions. At the current day, video material was received here from this point. Here positions of Russian forces came under attacks by FPV units of Ukrainian forces. Thus, we can conclude that the forward lines of Russians are located at this point, and all the territory marked in red today has passed under complete Russian control. Also, it is reported that Russian forces are actively pressing in the direction of Ozern, and here at the current moment, fierce confrontation is being conducted. Probably in the coming days, assault operations of this settlement will begin, and we will see advancement of the Russian army on this sector of combat operations, although it already exists. Moving on further on the map. From the Kupiansk front, video material is arriving, and information is also arriving. I remind you that some pro-Russian sources reported that Kurylypka is for the most part under Russian control. However, this information is still premature. Meeting engagements are being conducted here. Russian forces are counter-attacking in Kupiansk itself. Also, Ukrainian forces are attacking in the direction of Kupiansk, and fierce confrontation is being conducted here. As for Kupiansk, Vuzlovyi, Podoli, Kurylypka, Osinova and Blahodatna, no advancement in favor of the Russian army is being recorded here, despite the fact that there were reports here about the taking of some settlements under complete control. This information does not correspond to reality. Also, fierce confrontation is being conducted in the area of Petropavlivka. Despite the statement of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, Petropavlivka is now under the control of Ukrainian forces. And also, video material arrived from this point, from the central part of Kupiansk. Under this bridge, fighters of Ukrainian forces were destroyed. This video is unacceptable to show on YouTube, therefore I posted it on the Telegram channel. Here, an FPV crew delivers strikes on fighters of Ukrainian forces who are located under this bridge, and after which the corpses of these fighters are eaten by dogs. Therefore, this video is not for people with weak nerves. Thus, we can mark the territory in yellow. It is all under the control of Ukrainian forces. As pro-Russian sources report, also some pro-Ukrainian sources acknowledge that here the losses of Ukrainian forces are 7-1. That is, for one fighter of Russian forces, there are 7 fighters of Ukrainian forces, as here the defense line is mainly built from FPV units, and Russian forces destroy fighters of Ukrainian forces. Assault groups of Ukrainian forces even on approach with the help of FPV drones and artillery. At the current day, here are such transformations and news moving on further on the map. At the current day, we have such news and transformations. I thank everyone for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. All the best.